Di and I again prepared it. We were asked by a Seventh-day Adventist conference to talk about diet and disease and all those things. So the whole video we'll promote a little bit later. But the Good World had an interesting comment. In Genesis 1:29 and 30, it is emphatic that God created the world good, and he gave all the humans and the animals plants and fruits for their vegetables, for their food, for their total diet. There was no death, there was no destruction. Okay, now you may think a tomato or an apple is alive, but God has a different perspective. And that's one reason why naturally you pick up an apple and you bite it, or you pick up a dog and you bite it. Oh, you see, one's a vegetarian, one's a meat eater. If you bite the dog, it goes, yeah! And if it's dead, you can even say, the poor thing, I cooked a hot dog. You pick up an apple and bite it, you never say, oh, the poor apple, I killed it. In fact, naturally, you don't even react that way, because eating vegetables is not something that's bad anyway. Okay, one step further. Here's a good question for you. In a good world, could you have caught mad cow disease or bird flu? I was in Canada one year when they had both. Now, my favorite foods are steak and Chinese. Now, for the 6 weeks I was there, I wasn't allowed to eat them. Could you have caught them in a good world? No way. In a good world, I would not have been eating sensible cows or mad cows. I wouldn't have even gone to KFC for chicken. I would have been eating very healthy pumpkins and potatoes. You see, Genesis 1:26, God blessed them and said, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish, the fowl, every living thing that moves upon the earth. Now, I don't know about you, but I've grown up with animals, and the one thing I've discovered is they actually do know about our supposed dominion. Some people still have a lot of dominion, like animal trainers, lion trainers. Now, you wouldn't want a job like that, but most animals actually respect a human being who takes authority over them. Animals bite, usually because they sense fear in you. Even bees are like that. I kept bees once, and I made one mistake. I forgot to do my veil up. I'm smoking them out because that calms them down. But then the guard bees came out the front. They saw something, and then 2 of them hit my neck. Then 47 of them hit my neck. I counted the stings afterwards, and at that point I ran. It was just like in Donald Duck, pursued by a herd, a flock, whatever you want to call a bees. Swarm, that's the right word I'm trying to pick up at this time of the morning in Australia. And I dived into the water, and they finally gave up. Fortunately, I had a big pile of water there to dive into. They attacked my hat instead. I feared. Many people can stand there, one bee sting and they're dead. It's not the bee's toxin which is a problem. All I ended up with was a sore neck. It's the immune system sometimes. Man's ability to dominate has disappeared largely because of sin, and the creature's ability to sting you has got elevated because of the problem with sin, and also human immunity is another factor. Do you realize some kids in Australia have been bitten by snakes and it has no effect on them at all? Their immune system is way better than others. Every Christmas time, we see this. Here's the question. These creatures, mosquitoes, snakes, flies, ticks, T-Rex, in a good world, what would these good creatures have eaten? Do you realize that T-Rex would have not eaten what you think? He would have not done the Jurassic Park thing. He would have done the Jurassic Ark thing. So come and visit us up there. In a good world, could insects have spread malaria, mosquito, Ross River virus? You mightn't know that one. That's a mosquito bug one. Yellow fever, river blindness, the one that David Attenborough so boasts that he's an atheist because of that. He's an atheist because he's angry at God. Oh, he knows God exists. He just wishes he was him. Atheists all want to be God. So he uses an excuse that's a lie. Do you realize all of these creatures, even these insects, what are they looking for? Food. I mean, the mosquito wants to bite you. Only the woman, the female, sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned woman. That's real sexist. Only the female mosquito puts the bite on you because she's after protein to help her lay eggs. And in every case, in a good world, these creatures would have got the protein they're after from vegetation, but not now. You might want to ask how the world changed so mosquitoes have only got a choice sometimes to eat you or your dog. Good question. In the real world, in the good world, David Attenborough needs to put God into the picture and God's world, because river blindness would not have even been possible. Mad cow disease wouldn't have been possible. You see, there's the starting point. The point that Diane made and I made, and what's in the video we did for the SDA conference in the UK about disease. I think they were very brave inviting Creation Research to do that. We mentioned a few home truths about things that some of them would not have liked. Everything God created was very good. Let me prove it to you. You see my pictures of orchids? I've done programs on orchids, and you know that they're beautifully designed. They're even edible. I've eaten some on television. Okay, there's one of our orchids in Australia. I know it doesn't look much like an orchid. It's not even as big as your thumbnail, so most people never see it. My daughter and I were out for an hour and a half photographing this as the sun rose. Look at it. It's called a greenhood orchid. Some red versions of it will show up the tiny red. Can you see the little tongue right in the middle? When the wind blows, this wags. So sometimes this is called the politician's orchid. Its tongue never stops. Fascinating. But it's pollinated by insects. Do you see the little insect on the right-hand side? That's the head of a little mosquito. I know, I told you these were tiny. Do you realize mosquitoes pollinate orchids and they feed on orchids? The male mosquito, you'll be interested in knowing, only ever feeds on plants, on plant sap, on plant, on the orchid nectar. You know his long proboscis thing that you think, oh, God designed it to prick me. No, he designed it to prick into plant veins and to prick into orchid sort of nectaries. And it does a good job. And your skin is usually softer than that. Well, there he is. Yep, tiny plant. And you know what's interesting? When he gets up and he touches that tongue, the tongue picks him up and throws him into the back of the orchid. Yeah, very sensitive. Obviously designed, because look what happens next. I've cut the orchid in half so you can see what's down the bottom. There is the little tongue. Now it's right back against the back of the orchid, and the nectary is right in the bottom. The insect, he actually doesn't mind this. He's now trapped in the flower. He can't push that tongue out of the road. He's not strong enough. But he doesn't mind. He's having one for the road, one for Aunt Sally, one for Uncle Bill. He's getting a free fuel stop. But in exchange, he pays a price. There's only one way out. The door is locked. The front door, he has to go through the funnel to get through the back door. Funnel is the only way out. And the interesting thing is, do you see him halfway up the back? That's where he's going to head through that little tunnel. And at the other end of the tunnel is pollen. There it is from the front. You see the front door is locked. Now, these pictures here, we stood out for ages getting these pictures. As the sun came up, the sweat is pouring off us, and there are some mosquitoes that didn't wait for the orchid. They attacked us because our skin is softer, and they could smell, it was only the female that put the bite on us that day. Okay, the insect comes out. Can you see what's on its back? There's pollen. He crawls up. Why is he staying in the center? Because if you look at the whole orchid, the rest of it is shiny, but notice the middle bit is dull. That's because the middle bit is covered with tiny hairs, and he can't go anywhere except up in the way the plant directs him. He must pass the pollen. He has no choice but to do that. And then he, she, both of them will fly away to another plant, and they've got a pile of pollen on their back. Now, do you know something? When you look at these orchids, I watched for the next 2 hours. The insect had gone. No insect was going to come to this flower now. The door actually remained closed for 2 hours. The insects did not bother this orchid at all. They could not get in. And what's fascinating is the insect, if it needs another fuel, injection of fuel, I believe that's a big problem in England at the moment. You've got a problem with your fuel distribution over there. That's one reason Joseph was preaching at the sermon at the wedding today, because the pastor was stuck a long way away. Okay, this flower remained closed for 2 hours. What's fascinating is that the orchid gives the insect only enough fuel for about 10 to 15 minutes. If it wants more fuel to continue traveling, it has to visit another orchid. And when it does that, you see the door will be open for one last time. And that's when the insect will bring in somebody else's pollen. And do you see at the bottom of the flower there, down near the bottom of the slide? That orchid has been pollinated, and the pollen has actually gone down into that tiny little swelling. And when it swells up, it will become a seed head. And it will then burst, and thousands of tiny seeds will come out. And you know very well, and I know very well, when the orchid, the little seeds just go everywhere. There's millions of these things in Australia. And when they go everywhere, they will hatch. Well, hatch is not the right word. They will germinate and they will grow. And you know very well, an orchid always produces pumpkins. No, that doesn't happen at all. You know very well that whether it's a pumpkin, it turns into a pumpkin. Whether it's an orchid, it turns into an orchid, because you've got plenty of ways you can test what God said. He commanded the earth to bring forth plants, and they do that. He commanded the earth to bring forth plants after their kind, and they do that, and they do it well. And none of this is poisonous. Well, some of the plants have now degenerated to the point of being poisonous. Some of the plants, they were created to have a nasty flavor until they were ripe and ready to be eaten. You've wondered why the seed of green lemons is bitter, and why the skin of green lemons is bitter. It's to stop you eating it before the plant is ready to be pollinated and to actually spread its seeds abroad. How long have you got to get fertilization right? Can I encourage you to realize that when you look at even orchid fertilization, not only is it a brilliant example of insects that you think of as nasty, insects that you ask about, why did God make mosquitoes? No, it was not to get back at women because they sinned in the beginning. It was not to get back at men because they listened to their wife instead of listening to God. It was because they all did very good. But here's a key point. How long have you got to get fertilization right? If you don't get it right in the beginning, you never get it right. You only have one generation to make it work. If you don't have everything, you don't have anything. There's the evolutionist chief fallacy. Now, just a few more to finish this off and get you thinking. What did this good creature eat? T-Rex with its sharp teeth? It would have been a certified cabbage killer. Think it through. You see that T-Rex's teeth are not designed to kill things. I mean, the man who's found the most T-Rex on the planet, he actually certified that they are not designed to kill things. They're short-sighted, they can't run very fast to chase you, and their teeth all come out if they had a live animal in its mouth. You see, here's the issue. God made the world good, we ruined it. You want to know what's wrong with the planet? Then look in a mirror and don't blame God. Death entered the planet. The world changed from good to bad. The world is not the same. The world that David Attenborough once explained, he looks at Genesis 1 and says, why did God make nasty things? He should have read Genesis 3, where we sinned, and the real problem is that David Attenborough's a sinner who needs to repent. And then he'll understand that we blew it, not God. The world changed from good to bad to worse Noah's day. And here's one issue that you really need to come to grips with. Yesterday I was doing Vision Radio, and one of the people rang in and said, should we be eating meat? Because God made us all to be vegetarian. I mean, look at your teeth. Are they carnivorous teeth? Wow, look at the big fangs you've got. No, you're not designed to be a carnivore killer. Hang on, excuse me, my dog has just rushed in. I hope he doesn't make too much noise. He looks like a carnivore killer. There's the rule God gave to Noah. After Noah's flood, God gave us permission to kill and eat animals, birds and fish. And he warned us to not eat blood. In fact, here's our final question. When you have a look at what we are allowed to eat, can I encourage you? Pork, beef, insects, cabbage, wheat, black pudding? Which of those was Noah not allowed to eat? And the only answer is the last one. I know people say, well, the Jews don't eat pork, so we shouldn't eat pork. Well, Noah was allowed to eat pork. Noah was allowed to eat every creature that moved. Beef, insects, nothing wrong with John the Baptist diet. You know, crush up all those insects, mix them with honey. Actually, it doesn't taste too bad. Cabbage, wheat, but don't eat the blood. That upsets a lot of my Scottish relatives and my German friends, but that's God's rule. And the fact is, it's the only rule of eating that was passed on into the New Testament.